Well, we are continuing on through our one-word prayer series. If you are just joining us for the first time, we started by saying to God, okay. When he speaks to us, our answer should be okay. And then we realize, though, that when he gives us something to do, our answer will always be, help, please, because I can't do this on my own. And so we learn how to humble ourselves and to say, could you help me? Last week we recognized that we will always fall short. We will always fail. We need to come to God and say, I'm so sorry. And when we say sorry, he always brings forgiveness, always brings grace. Our word for today is not really a word. I cheated a little bit. It's a sound. Because there's times in life when we are just so exhausted, when we're so weary, when we're so discouraged, that all we can really do is let out a sigh. Oof. You ever get home from a day? Maybe at the end of the week, it's been a terrible week, a long day. You come home, you set everything down, and you just go to the kitchen counter, you lean against the counter and just go, oof. That's all you can do. We've all been there. We've all been there. And it happens spiritually too. Sometimes all you can do is just, I've had enough. Whew. Following Jesus can be exhausting, can't it? When you're the only one in your family. You're the only one at work. You're the only one of your friends. And it's hard. Oof. Staying faithful to God when the temptations are so strong and the cost is so high, sometimes all you can do is, oof. Right? Serving faithfully when you've been faithfully serving God with little to no recognition, when you wonder if you're making any difference, and sometimes at the end of the day you just go, oh, that's all you got left. And that sigh reveals a deep weariness, right? A deep weariness and a deep discouragement. It's often one of the most honest things you can say to God. I'm tired. I'm weary. I'm discouraged. And you know, if you feel bad about saying that to God, recognize that you're in good company. Because some of the greatest heroes of the faith that we know did the same thing. They reached a point where they were out of words and they just came to God and said, oh. None more clearly than the Old Testament prophet Elijah, who we're going to look at this morning. But we're going to walk through a chapter in the Bible. So if you have your Bibles or on your phones, if you want to turn to 1 Kings chapter 19, in a minute we're going to walk through that chapter together. Well, Elijah, if you don't know who he is, was one of the most powerful Old Testament prophets, right? One of the heroic ones, one of the greatest. There's statues of him all over the place, right? Right? And this great prophet of God reaches the point in his life, in his journey, where he is weary enough that he is just ready to quit. In fact, he tells God, I've had enough. I'm done. I am done. And we get to hear his sigh in chapter 19. We get to hear how God responds. Let me set the stage for you, okay? Introduce you a little bit to Elijah, in case you've forgotten who he is. Elijah, Old Testament prophet, served Israel, right, in the time when Ahab and Jezebel were king and queen. And those names maybe ring a bell for you because Ahab was the most evil king that Israel ever had. And Jezebel, his wife, was even worse. This was a season in Israel's history when evil reigned supreme, and anybody who stood for God stood against the king and against the queen and against all that this culture was standing for. And that's exactly what Elijah was doing. He was God's voice in the middle of this nation that was anti-God. Everything opposite of what God would want. And as Elijah stands for God, he does some pretty amazing things through Elijah. And so Elijah goes to Ahab and Jezebel, and when they refuse to turn towards God, he says, fine, you know what? It's not going to rain here in Israel for 3 years. And God stops the rain. For 3 years, not a drop of rain. Of course, Jezebel and Ahab don't like this, so they are hunting Elijah down. So he flees to a town just outside of Israel, Zarephath it's called. And he rents a room from a widow there who had a son. And when this boy dies, Elijah raises him from the dead. Pretty amazing power of God working through Elijah, right? And then maybe this is the story you remember most. Chapter 18, just before the one we're going to read. Elijah calls all the prophets of Baal, right, the enemy god, onto the top of Mount Carmel for a challenge. And they both set up altars and put a sacrifice on the altar. And Elijah says to the 850 prophets of Baal, go ahead, take your time. Why don't you have Baal call down fire and light this offering you have on fire? And they spend hours calling on Baal to burn up the offering, and nothing happens. And then Elijah says, okay, my turn. But first, why don't you pour some buckets of water on top of my offering? And pour more water, and pour more water. Fine, okay, it's doused in water. Elijah prays to God and says, God, show your power. And fire rains down from heaven, burns up not only the offering, but the whole altar made of stone. The stones disintegrate. What an amazing victory. And again, different culture and different time, but all 850 prophets of Baal are put to death because they lost the challenge, right? It's a moment of awesome victory for God and for Elijah, right? Elijah is on top of the mountaintop, literally, on top of the world with this victory. And then almost immediately, this mountaintop moment crumbles for Elijah. Chapter 19. Listen to Queen Jezebel's response to Elijah. Just verses 1 and 2. It says, now King Ahab told his wife Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. I'm going to kill you. Jezebel says, by this time tomorrow, you're a dead man. And that's a serious threat. Jezebel has power. She has authority. She is someone who should be feared, right? But Elijah should know better than to fear Jezebel. What did he just see God do? What did he just witness? His response should have been, I'm not afraid of you, Jezebel. My God can rain down fire from heaven. My God has all the power in the world. Your great authority is nothing compared to my God. So let's listen to Elijah's response. Verses 3 and 4. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. What a difference between chapter 18 to chapter 19. Right? Elijah's on top of the world, and now he's hiding under a bush, ready to die. Under Jezebel's threat, all of his confidence crumbles. His strength is gone, and he's just ready to quit. He's weary. And his weariness steals his confidence and replaces it with fear. I'm afraid. And so often when we are spiritually weary, when we are spiritually exhausted, we forget all that God has done and all that God can do. We just forget because we think it all depends on us, right? And we learned when we talked about the word help, it doesn't depend on us. We can't do this on our own. When we think that everything depends on our strength and our wisdom and our ability and our courage, you know what? Then we should be afraid. Then we should be afraid because we cannot do this on our own. Elijah cannot do this on his own. And when Elijah looks into the future and only sees fear, when you and I look into the future and only see fear, that's evidence that we've forgotten who God is. We've forgotten what God has done, how he can rain down fire from heaven, how he can raise people from the dead. And we forget that that power is still alive today. It's a warning sign to us when we're afraid that we've forgotten God's presence and we've forgotten God's power. Right? And you and I forget about God's presence and power just like Elijah did as he ran and hid. And when we do, when we forget who God is, like Elijah, we will sink into spiritual despair as well. Right? Verse 4, he says, God, just kill me now. I've had enough. I'm done. I am done. Because all that I've ever done is worthless. And I'm all alone. And what can I do all alone? And you know, those are the lies, the same lies that our weary hearts and our weary minds will try to convince us are true. Right? We'll be tempted to believe that all that we've done for Jesus is worthless. And all that we're doing, all the good we're trying to do is meaningless. Right? We'll be tempted to believe that we are failures as parents, as spouses. We're failures as followers of Jesus. We'll look at all the women that we haven't saved and think, useless. We're a drop in the bucket. What difference are we making? We'll think we're not making any difference in the classroom where God has placed us as a teacher, in the office where we're at. That the ministry that we've invested so much in doesn't mean a thing. And we'll believe like Elijah that we're friendless. There's no one else. Right? We'll believe the lie that we are all alone, right? Nobody cares about what I've done or the sacrifices I've made. I'm the only believer in my class. I'm the only one following Jesus, right? There's no one here to help me. And if I just disappeared today, no one knows. Look what Elijah thought. Isn't it the lie that we so often believe? I'm guessing that these lies are familiar to us. To most, if not all of us here, at least one of them. So Elijah is exhausted, and on top of all this weariness, on top of his despair, he now goes on a grueling 2-day hike into the desert and gets even more exhausted. And this physical exhaustion that he faces goes hand in hand with spiritual exhaustion. We need to recognize that. Physical exhaustion and spiritual exhaustion, they are like best friends. One goes with the other. And so Elijah has been running too long, he's been working too hard, and it's affecting his relationship with God now. And I would guess that some of us here recognize that. Because we are physically worn out. And our physical exhaustion brings spiritual emptiness. We haven't taken care of ourselves. And we're now running on empty, just like Elijah was. Right? Elijah is weary, he's exhausted, and it's shut him down, and he comes to God with nothing left except a deep sigh. And it's this exhaustion that stops him long enough to finally be still, to finally be quiet, and to listen to God. You know, I love that God just listens to his deep sigh, his honest sigh, his honest, I give up, I got nothing left. And God meets him in that weariness. And if you come here with nothing but a deep sigh left, know that God will meet you in your weariness. Okay, let's look at the rest of this chapter to see God's response to Elijah's, I've had enough. Look at how God cares for his weary and discouraged children. Right, verses 5 through 9 show us that he starts by refreshing Elijah's physical weariness. Right, listen to 5 through 9. He says, it goes on, Elijah lay down under the bush and fell asleep. And all at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank, and he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and he ate and drank. Strengthened by the food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into a cave and spent the night. I love how God meets him and cares for his physical needs to begin with, right? What does he give Elijah? He starts by giving him a snack and a nap. Right? What we need as kids, if you've ever parented kids and your kid is out of control, you know a snack and a nap is like a miracle. That's the cure-all. God knows sometimes what you need is you need a snack and a nap. You need some physical restoration. And so he takes care of Elijah's body first. And often God speaks his love by refreshing you physically, because he knows that affects your spiritual health. And so in those moments when all you have left is a deep sigh, when you're exhausted and despair, if you listen carefully to God, you might hear him say, "Hey, have you been eating right? Hey, how's your sleep at night? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising well? Are you taking your right meds? Are you taking care of yourself physically? Because that's important, and I care about that. And that matters." And God takes care of him because it restores his body. But, did you notice he doesn't let Elijah stay there? Right? He brings him food, he brings him water twice, but he doesn't give Elijah a well, and he doesn't build him a cottage. And he doesn't say, "Why don't you just settle here now and stay here, and I'll take care of you." No. He gives Elijah the rest he needs. He gives him the food he needs. Because there's still more to be done. Because he still has a plan and a purpose for him. There's another journey. He already journeyed for 2 more days, and there's another long journey ahead. This food, this physical restoration, is to empower you for the journey we still have ahead of us, right? Honestly, some of us, I would guess, have been sitting in the shade for a bit too long. Some of us needed that restoration that God gives because we were weary and exhausted, and we loved this restoration so much that we settled in and we built a cottage, and here we sit. And God needs to say to us, it's time to get moving. It's time to get going again. There's still more to be done. I still have a purpose and a plan for you. So let's go. God refreshes us physically for spiritual purposes. Right? Because when Elijah is refreshed, when he's had the drink, when he's had the food, God says to him, let's go. There's more to be done. And he brings spiritual strength and spiritual healing to Elijah. Right? So in verse 14, skip forward with me. In verse 14, Elijah tells God his despair. He speaks to him again and tells him the lies that he's believed. Right? At the end of 13, God's voice says to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah is honest. He says, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. But the Israelites have rejected your covenant. They've torn down your altars. They've put your prophets to death with the sword. And I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. That's enough, he says. Here's the truth. I'm all alone, and whatever I do is hopeless, and I'm helpless. And listen to what God says to him. Verse 15 through 18. The Lord said to him, go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son over Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him. He says to Elijah, you're believing a lie. You are not alone. You are absolutely not alone. Here are 3 spiritual leaders I'm going to raise up who are already faithful to me, and they're going to do the work alongside of you. And you know what else? There are 7,000 people in Israel just like you. 7,000 people who are faithful to me. 7,000 people who are standing firm in what they believe. You think you're alone? You're not alone. There are thousands of people standing for me. And you are making a kingdom difference, Elijah. You may not see it, you may not know it, but all of your words over the years have helped these people stay faithful, have helped them stand with me. I am using you, he says. And if you came here discouraged, if you came here thinking whatever you've been doing is worthless and meaningless, God says to you, I am using you. In big and small ways, I will never let your work for me go unused. I'm not alone. You would be missed if you disappeared. And God often speaks that truth. He spoke that truth to Elijah. That the power that my power is working in you and you're not alone. He spoke that directly. For you and I, sometimes he speaks that to us. Most often he speaks those truths through each other. Through you and I talking to each other. Being the voice of God to each other. That's why, one of the reasons why we come here together and gather together on Sundays, so we can look around and say, yeah, I'm not alone. I may feel alone all week long, but I'm not. Look, there's other people standing with me. We come here so that we can see each other and celebrate the ways we see God working through each other. And I hope we learn how to speak the truth to each other, to say, You make a difference. Thank you. You matter to God. And God has used you to change me. You matter. We need to speak God's truth to each other. Otherwise, we forget. And we begin to doubt. And we begin to feel all alone. So God responds to Elijah's spiritual weariness by saying, whatever you do for me, I'm using it. And you think you're all alone? You are far from alone. There are thousands like you. And then finally, he responds to Elijah's weary sigh by giving him a partner in ministry, by giving him a friend to stand beside him. Listen to the end of this chapter. Verse 19 says, Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and then I will come with you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people. And they ate. And then he set out to follow Elijah, and he became his servant. In a beautiful gift, God gives Elisha. And Elisha becomes his friend and his ministry partner. A reminder to him at all times that he's not alone. That it doesn't all depend on him. A reminder to him that God is in control. Right? Elisha is there to point Elijah back to God, to remind him again of God's presence and God's power that he so easily forgets. And in the same way, God gives us each other here at Mountain View Church. We are partners in life and ministry together. And God knows that no one should feel like they're standing alone in their faithfulness to God. No one should feel like they're all by themselves in their service to God. Because if we do, we will get weary, and we will get discouraged, and we will soon be left with nothing but a weary sigh if we're trying to do it all by ourselves. Just like God gave Elisha to Elijah, God has given us to each other. And we are here to remind each other of God's presence and power when we're tempted to forget. And we are here to remind each other that none of us stand alone. I don't know where you are today in your spiritual journey as you listen to this. I would guess that some of us here are weary. We are just plain weary. And maybe we need to ask God for that partner. That partner to come alongside of us and to encourage us, to point us back to God before we despair, before we fall apart. I would guess others of us here need to be willing to step up and be that partner for somebody. Because there's weary people around you who feel like they're all alone, who feel like they're carrying the load all by themselves. And maybe God has given you a needed time of nourishment and refreshment. Thank Him for that. Praise God that He does that. And now He's saying to you, it's time to go. It's time to get busy again. And even those small, seemingly insignificant acts of service, let me tell you, feel big to those who are weary when you step up and you offer them. So maybe some of you hear God saying it's time to step up. And you need to say, where can I start? What can I do? How can I encourage someone? Because all of us, sometime or another, if we're taking our walk with God seriously, will have these times of weariness. Times we don't have any words left, and all we've got is that deep sigh that says, I've had enough. And it's when we run out of words then that we can hear God most clearly. And so let God hear your honest sigh, and then listen for his encouragement. Listen for his presence, telling you I'm still here, I'm still powerful. Let me care for you. Let me refresh you. Let me give you this moment of restoration. And if you aren't weary, look around for those who are. And let God speak his words of encouragement through you. Look for ways, big or small, that God is asking you to share the love. And God is asking you to be a live shut. Let's pray for that together. Would you join me in prayer?